Well, I certainly hope that these books are transportative to readers. They are set in a very specific time and place that I didn't realize was, I didn't realize I was writing a period piece when I was writing it. They're set in 2012, 2013. But the more I worked on them, the more I was trying to be specific to that time. And they're set in Chicago, so that was a time shortly after I had moved away from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago. So trying to build and preserve sort of my sense of what the city was like into the book was really fun to be able to capture things from my own experience, if that makes sense. So.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the author podcast, where we meet amazing authors from around the world. And today we have two people, myself and the author today, both enjoying the company of a cat during the recording of the podcast. And that's great, right? Yeah, I'm looking at my cat. It's exciting to meet with great authors and follow their journey and learn so much about what they do and how they show up in this world. So we're going to talk today, encourage you as an author in your journey. You're going to learn a bunch today. But as a reader, you want to fall in love with a great author, we're going to do it today. And I'm so excited to have my guest on the show. Gwydhar's here with us. We're going to be talking about all of the great things that she's done as an author and learn more about her. Welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
It's exciting. Tell everybody where you are, first of all, in this great big world of ours.
Currently I'm living in Los Angeles, so that's where I'm hailing in from today.
Beautiful. And you have snow like we do in Canada, right?
In the distant mountains, we have snow, yeah.
It's much better when you can drive to it and drive away from it. We're surrounded by it here in Canada, so we don't have that option, unfortunately. But yeah, your journey as an author, let's jump in right away. How did all this happen for you? Multiple books, and you're writing and sharing your stories. What happened? How did you get here?
As a kid, I always knew I enjoyed telling stories. And the path to becoming an author specifically was a little bit circuitous in that I originally was interested in pursuing film production because the way I would think would be in pictures, and it made sense to try and tell stories through pictures. So I went to graduate school for film production. And while I was there, I was sort of resisting the urge to go into writing. That seemed like something special that people who focused on that craft got to do. And I would always try and work with writers. And then when I graduated out into the real cold world where you have to work a day job, I was trying to keep my creative faculties engaged in my free time. And film production is very complicated and expensive, but writing is something you can do anywhere, even, say, on a bus while going to work. And so that's when I really got into writing prose and decided to focus on putting this particular story into words. And it just sort of became a ritual every day that was both very enjoyable to do as an act and also allowed me to tell this story, which had been knocking around my head for, by that point, about 10 years. It took me 3 or 4 years to actually get it on paper. But yeah, it was sort of an evolution that I took along with the story, and it was a great process.
So where was the original seed of the story then? Where did that come from?
I mean, the seed of the story is the protagonist. The books tell the story of the frontman of a metalcore band named Damon Warner, who the band is on the skids, and they have one last chance to revive their career if they go back to their hometown of Chicago. So they do, but then he has to face his estranged family. And the character himself just sort of came into my head fully formed and began screaming in my ear. And if you read the books, you'll understand this is not a voice you can really ignore. And so, like I say, it took me a little while to find the right form in which to tell this story, whether it was going to be a screenplay or a graphic novel or whatnot. And then ultimately it became a novel, which works really well because it allows us to be inside his head with him and really see the world through his eyes.
So at the point of recording now, we have 3 books in the series. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was written as one gigantic book,
Okay.
which seemed like a lot to ask of someone to, take a risk on a debut author with a 900-page book. So I broke it into 3, so it's a trilogy.
Okay.
First book is Enfant Terrible Opening Acts, just the yellow cover.
Yep.
The second book is Enfant Terrible Headliner, which is the pink cover. And then the third book is Enfant Terrible Showstopper, which is the blue cover. But they all tell the story. It's sort of a year in the life of this character as he, tries to keep his career alive, deals with his family, goes through an emotional arc of learning about himself and growing up. It's a lot going on, and it's sort of great fun to watch him engage in the chaos he likes to bring to the world.
Can we talk about the covers? Because they're beautiful, by the
Thank
way.
you.
Like, talk us through this. Like, where did the idea for all this beautiful artwork come from?
Well, first of all, I have to shout out the cover designer. Her name's Emily Bratton. She's amazing. The concept I had was to sorry if I move it out of my profile, it gets blurry. My concept was to go with sort of a look that was similar to old punk posters that were just Xeroxed on bright paper, so black and white and one pop of color. And so then finding sort of imagery that it expresses the chaos of the character. Book 2 is where there's more of a relationship between the protagonist, and he gets into a relationship with a girlfriend with a 5-year-old daughter, and he becomes kind of a father figure. So there's a hint of that on this cover. And the third one is where things sort of really get chaotic.
So book 2, the headliner, that's the daughter image we're seeing with the devil horns and stuff. I'm a musician, so you got me at the whole idea of the book. So good job on that. Do you have a musical passion? Is it something that you've kind of had your whole life? Like, why these books? Why this story? Talk a little bit more about the music side of all this.
I wish I could say that I were a musician myself. I played violin badly for about 6 years when I was in elementary school and junior high. So now I'm a great appreciator of music without being a musician myself. But for me, writing a character who's a musician is a similar vein of being able to write someone who is creative like a writer or an artist, in that there's inspiration which comes up that's a little bit ephemeral. It's a little hard to say where it comes from, and yet it drives so much of one's life and story.
I think, well, again, I'm on your website while we're chatting. You're an artist as well. So it's just whatever medium you're using, whatever tool you're using, creativity comes in many different ways, but how it's demonstrated in many different ways, but it's all basically the same thing.
I feel like music especially too has a very strong connection with emotion, that it isn't as quantifiable as visual arts, which have sort of an image, or written arts, which have text. Like it goes beyond that in ways that are really special. And I wish I was able to tap into that. And I admire the people who can so much. So for me, it was fun to be able to, again, sort of see the world through the eyes of someone and imagine what it's like to be a musician who can just sit at a piano and let the music come to them.
Music definitely connects to emotions, for sure. Also connects to time and place. So you can hear a song that you heard 20 years ago, and you're like, you transport yourself back to that moment, and you can see yourself in the car, the songs on the radio, whatever. It just takes you places. I think a good story does the same thing, though. So for you as an author, how do you bring in emotion in time and space into your writing to make it feel more realistic? What do you do?
Well, I certainly hope that these books are transportative to readers. They are set in a very specific time and place that I didn't realize I was writing a period piece when I was writing it. They're set in 2012, 2013. But the more I worked on them, the more I was trying to be specific to that time. And they're set in Chicago. So that was a time shortly after I had moved away from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago. So trying to build and preserve sort of my sense of what the city was like into the book was really fun to be able to capture things from my own experience, if that makes sense.
And then so real places, like real locations in Chicago, like you're really kind of leveraging your history there?
Yeah. I did my best to create geography within the book that's accurate both to the city and to my memory. And things like weather events and whatnot, just, looking back at the time, like what was happening in the winter here? What happened? What big storms came through in the summer?
So in the process of writing it, how did you change? Like what made a difference for you just by sitting down to write these books?
Well, when you take 10 to 15 years to write a book, there's a lot of change that goes on. And it's a little hard to tease apart what about me changed because of writing the book and what changed just because I was growing up at the same time. But I would say there was definitely a growing up that took place. One of the themes in the book is growing up, and it's from the point of view of a character who's just turned 30. And if you're a musician, there's this notion of the 27 club, that if you hit 30, you're too old. And that this character is really struggling with that throughout the books. But also then discovering that there's so much more life to be lived, and life's not over. You're just, moving into a new chapter, which, as I'm writing this for a protagonist, I'm also experiencing for myself.
Interesting, because that's the name of my show, Living the Next Chapter.
Right, yeah.
And you're talking about that, living that chapter. Okay. Tell me more about Damon. Like, what do we need to know about this character so that as we grab all three books, what is kind of like your introduction? If you were to introduce him on stage, he's coming out to address an audience to talk about the book or his story, how would you introduce us to him? What would be your introduction?
It would be hard to introduce him without a lot of swear words. That would certainly be in character for him. It would be easy to just relegate him to the category of anti-hero because he's not a very traditional hero in the sense of not being terribly good or likable necessarily. He's manipulative and charismatic and chaotic and self-destructive, and he's a lot of fun to read about and follow. He's very incisive of a point of view to read from, but not always very constructive. But there is an emotional layer to him that has a lot of heart, which I really love. And I was so pleased that as people were reading and responding to the books, that they really resonated more with that sort of emotional core of him. I worried / expected people to read the books wanting the chaotic fun of sex, drugs, and rock and roll and this, tabloid lifestyle, and then get, annoyed that, there's this emotional stuff. But no, people have really enjoyed the emotional heart to it, and I'm so pleased because that, to me, that's the more important part to the story.
Well, book 2, you've kind of alluded to the fact that now he's got this young girl in his life, which is interesting. That's a different side of him, I would anticipate. Mm-hmm. But is he the type of person that we could kind of imagine would draw people to him? Like people will feel drawn to him, or do people feel like he's bigger than life? You can't reach out to him. You can't be close to him. He's just bigger than me. Like, where's the balance for him as a character?
That's an interesting question. I would say my sense is that he's a person that draws people to him. He can also be larger than life, but he doesn't cultivate, or like that's not what he doesn't put that forth as sort of an attitude necessarily, unless he gets annoyed with someone or someone tries to front up against him, then he'll sort of unleash his full potential.
Yeah, there's from a musical perspective, I've met a lot of singers and a lot of band members who have a persona that they put on when they go on stage. they are different. And when they come off stage, they're a completely different person. Like when they're on stage, they're loud and they're excited. They come off stage, they're quiet, they're in the corner. They don't want to see anybody, right? So it's like they have to turn on the switch and turn it off. Does Damon have that switch?
A little bit, in that there are scenes where we get to follow him while he's on stage, and he describes how much more alive he feels on stage. Like he really, gains energy from this and feels like he's in tune with the universe. It's not that he's a different person when he's not on stage. He just sort of feels a little contained. But also on stage, I think he's allowed to only have to be the performer, whereas in the rest of his life, there are all these other elements that he doesn't quite know what to do with and that cause him trouble, emotional trouble and relationship trouble and just trying to get along in the world kind of trouble that he's able to shed when on stage. So it's not that he's a different person. He's just able to free himself of the things that he doesn't know how to handle.
Right. Because I've seen like introverts on stage who get addicted to the admiration and the attention that they get when they're on stage. But the moment they leave, jump back on the bus or get in their car and drive away and become, quote unquote, a normal person again, then they really struggle because they're not getting that same input that they get when they're on stage and people are cheering and want to be like them and want to meet them. When they blend back into society, they lose their identity.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if there's elements of that come out in your story as well.
There is a little bit where he'll describe sort of coming down off of a stage high and having to, cope with that until he can sort of level himself out again.
So in book 2 then, with Headliner, does that, the young girl, is that kind of a leveling out for him?
It's a chance for him to discover things about himself that he didn't know. Like it starts out where he meets the girl who's his girlfriend, and she doesn't initially tell him that she has a daughter. She keeps that private, and he ends up discovering it by accident. His sister happens to be babysitting for the daughter, and that's how he finds out. And he's like, well, why didn't you tell me? And suddenly he's confronted with this notion of being in a relationship with someone who has a child and whether or not he is going to play a part in that child's life. And he's one of those characters where from the outside you would think, the front man for a rock band is not going to be a very good parental figure, but he really does love children in an avuncular way. He likes being sort of a bad uncle, bad influence. And so he and the kid hit it off. And then sort of the more time he spends with her, the more meaningful the relationship becomes until he does sort of become a father figure. Not to spoil anything of that, but then it causes him to have realizations about his own life that really help him grow. But it's sort of a surprising journey to take a rock star on, I think, of this sort of domestic drama.
What other kind of feedback have you had from readers about the books?
Like I say, people have responded really well to the emotional elements and the heart of the stories, which I really love, because I love the character so much, having spent so much time with him in my head, that it is really thrilling for me to have other people get to enjoy that same experience.
Do you have anybody in your mind that Damon is loosely based on? Somebody that you have met or you know of or have heard of that you've kind of framed that character around?
I don't have a specific person that I've based him on, but there are elements of a lot of musical artists and performing artists that the arc he goes through is a pretty common one of becoming really big and then sort of not spiraling out and hitting bottom and then having to, come back from that. But I wouldn't say it was based on any one specific person. But I will say that researching this introduced me to a lot of great music. So
there you go. Okay. So if this band could get up on stage and play a song for you, what would be your song request from this band?
Like of an existing song? Or
any song that you could have them play for you. What song would you want them to play for you?
That's a good question. I don't really know. Like the songs that they describe in the book, because they're also trying to write a new album throughout, and the different songs they're coming up with. There's one song they end up writing in the third book called Not My Girl, which has two sort of layers to it of, it seems like it's an unrequited love song, but there's also a layer you could understand as being sort of, a father-daughter relationship and this sense of being unable to connect with someone who's special to you. And it's really regrettable for me, not being a musical person myself, that I don't actually have the music for this song in my head. And I really wish I did. Like, I know what the emotion of it's supposed to be and a few lyrics here and there. But like, if I could hear them play that song, that would be amazing.
Okay. All right. Well, there's somebody listening to this going, I'd love to help you with that. I could put some music to that.
Yeah, so if anyone's up for it, let me know. I would love to bring that to life.
All right. Bring that. That's amazing. From Damon's character, what really draws you to the character yourself, personally?
I feel like initially the reason I was so drawn to the character is that he is so bold and willing to go against the grain of the norm. In my own life, I tend to be pretty, I like staying within the lines, actually. I'm not that outwardly rebellious or, trying to break down what is. But there are times when I really wish I were a little bit more willing to, break with convention. For me, it was always very enjoyable to put my own frustrations through this character and be like, so what would he do with that? Just for sort of the enjoyment of it. I would also say, though, I love that he's both incisive enough and also emotionally connected enough to be able to make really astute observations about the world that offer a point of view that are not sort of something that would be obvious to anyone. I'm not expressing that. I was able to see the world differently because I sort of had this character in my head.
That's the one thing about musicians is we get instant feedback from an audience on whether things are going well or not by their response. And there's a feedback loop that's happening. So the more the audience gets into it, the more the band gets into it, and the audience gets into it, right? And you can also find when things are not going well, people get up and start walking out. That's information, right? That's for a band or a singer. That's really good feedback. So I think that we get kind of addicted to that feedback, and we want to get out and perform our new songs or share our story so that people will give us that feedback because we long for that. We want that connection with an audience. And I think that's one thing that I love about what you're doing in your books is you're kind of bringing out elements of that through this character. It's something that's common to all of us. We want to be accepted. We want to be seen. We want to have people notice us. That's what band members do. Like we don't record in a closet and then never release our music. We don't write a book and never publish it, right? We want to get our stuff out there. We want to get that feedback. So do you see a parallel with writing the books with maybe how Damon would write music? Like the fact that you want to get your stuff out there and build community around your writing, is that kind of, you see a similarity there as well?
A little bit. I mean, certainly wanting to, create something creative and then share it with an audience. It is a little less, like you say, of direct feedback when you're a writer because it just takes A, so long to write something, and B, so long for someone to read it and then respond to you. But I will say to any readers out there, if you're ever meeting with an author or a writer you can't say too many nice things about what you like in their work. Don't worry about overdoing it. But also, it's always thrilling for me when someone's willing to tell me what it was like for them to read parts of it and what really resonated and what it brought up in them, because that's a part, getting to know how a reader experiences your book is so different from the way you experience it when you're writing it. But that's a really special connection to get to make.
One of the things I like to ask some of my authors when they come on, especially when they build a world around a character and you're constructing this whole world and all the people that are connected to this person, sometimes there's things about your character that you don't even know the answer to. Like you build this whole world and then there's like, well, I never actually thought about this part of their life. So if Damon was able to walk in and sit down with you, and it's just the two of you, and you could ask this character something you don't know the answer to, is there any question that you would have for him that you're curious about him, his character, his story, that is kind of like an unsolved piece for you as the writer?
I'm not sure that unsolved is the word so much as unexplored. Like, I wish I knew more about his actual childhood and growing up. There's a meaningful life event that happens to him when he's about 13 that does play into the books. But sort of the life before that, I only have sketchy knowledge of, a sense of, without really knowing details. And it would have been great. It would be great to get to everyone always hates when someone like brings out the photo album and sits you down. We're going to look at all the slides now, but like that would be really cool to be able to do with this character.
Nice. Yeah, I have those photo albums just off camera. Yeah, if you pull those out, we're going to be talking about all kinds of stories. Yeah, I get that. So for readers, let's talk specifically to the readers. What is your love letter to a reader? They're going to start with book 1, opening acts, and they're going to go all the way all through the whole series. But before I open book 1, I'm going to read for the first time reader. What is your message to that reader? What do you want them to walk away with from book 1 into the next in the series? Just you and them together. What do you want them to know about these books that would help them to really dive in right away?
Well, the first book especially comes on sort of with gleeful, chaotic energy of things going wrong in interesting ways. And so if you're coming into it, I hope it will be with a sense of morbid enjoyment at someone else's misfortune. It involves a lot of this character, again, struggling to keep his career going while sort of being given the barest possible amount of things to do it with, like no money and no connections and which is always the basis of great comedy, when you give a protagonist an insurmountable task and no resources with which to do it and then say, go. And there is a hint of the deeper heart that's going to be coming out in the later books. So I hope there's enough connection that gets made in that first book to then draw you into the later ones and the more meaty parts of the story.
So you said this all kind of started out as one massive book, now split into 3. Are you happy with the results of all 3 as 3 separate standalone projects?
I am. I think breaking it into 3 really helped me build different arcs of the story into each portion. There are elements where I wish I'd been able to keep it as one, just because it would have been nice to have pulled some things all the way through instead of having to wrap them up in book 1 or 2. So it would have been great as 1. It would have been great. It is great as 3. But sometimes choices have to be made to bring it to an audience in a good way.
Are the books standalone, or do you really need to read them in order?
They're reasonably standalone, actually, that if you pick up book 2 or 3 without having read 1, I do my best to reintroduce all the characters and set up where they're coming from. But there will be things that make more sense in the later books if you've read the first one to know the actual event that he references. He'll give you the important information about what happened before, but you may have gotten to actually read the scene if you read the earlier books.
So somebody sends you an email, knocks on the door, gives you a call and says, I love this series. We need to make this into a movie or something. Are you going to be like, no, not interested? Or you'll be like, heck yeah, we got to do this. Like,
I'm going to be like tackling them and be like, shut up, take my money. How do I sign up? Where do I sign? I feel like this would be a great television series or, streaming series. Probably a streaming series in which swearing and nudity and, things are more audience appropriate than, say, network television. But I often compare it to the shows Shameless and Californication, if you're familiar with
Love
those.
Californication and Shameless are both amazing shows. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're such good ensemble pieces where it's a character like that where you're following a character or characters like that where the trouble just keeps happening and it's so much fun to watch them navigate it.
Those are good reference points then for anybody listening. And if you love Shameless and Californication, then you're like, oh, so these are my books then.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Okay. See, that's a good point of reference. I like that. Yeah, my mind's going back to watching all those. Mm-hmm. Great shows. Yeah, good stuff. That's a good reference. I like that. Good. So, okay, what is your hope from this point forward? Now you got these 3 books out in the world. Where do you go from here? What do you do next?
Well, with these books, I'm hoping that they'll continue to find their audience and gain momentum. As a independent author, I learned a lot in the process of publishing them and promoting them that I had to learn without knowing, but now I wish I'd known sort of in order to bring them to an audience better. I don't know if that answered the question. So, but the next project I'm working on a series of books that will be about the California water wars. So it'll be historical fiction, different genre. But I'm really excited in that it's another sort of scoundrel protagonist. It's actually got 2 narrators instead of 1. So I'm really excited to be exploring this new world now. And maybe someday down the line, I'll even return to the Enfant Terrible sort of universe and build out some more stories within it. So
interesting. I always like hearing what people are working on, like, because it feels, well, it's like podcasting. Once you do one, you're going to do more. So the fact that you have these 3 books, it's like, well, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep writing. That's amazing. And you have, again, on your website, you have your artwork. You have all the books are listed there as well. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. Take us through the website. Let's talk about that. And I kind of want to wrap up with a question here close to the end, but take us through the website. What are we going to find? Where are we going? Where are you most active?
Sure.
So that we can kind of follow your journey.
Yeah. Well, the website that you keep describing is my personal website. It's Gwydhar.com, which is spelled Gwydhar.com. And it's a little hard to spell, but once you can spell it, I'm the only Gwydhar on the internet, so you'll find me. So I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, for better or worse. I'm sort of nominally on Instagram, but I don't actually post much there. If you wanted to reach out to me, it is me on there. You can message me through it, but probably Facebook is the more direct, regularly checked account. But then the website is, I've got the books up. I've got some artwork that I've been working on. I'm working on going back to doing a regular blog with posts of just thoughts and things about writing and life and sort of philosophical meanderings. And then by day, I work as a production coordinator for animated film studio. So I get to make animated movies. for my day job, which is pretty cool.
And there's a recent release just came out as well on Netflix.
There is, yeah. The company I work for is called Skydance Animation, and their film Spellbound just came out in November on Netflix. So I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to check it out. It is family friendly, unlike my books.
There you go. Awesome. And I see also some scripts here as well from you. Wow.
Yeah, no, I did some screenwriting for a while, and I'm working on getting back to it actually. But yeah, I've done a couple. I did a historical fiction screenplay that's about the first Korean American woman to serve in World War II in the Navy, and one that I did a thriller script, and I've done one that's sort of a ensemble young adult comedy in the vein of Stand By Me, but with Girl Scouts.
That's great. And your art as well. You got to talk about your art. Come on.
Yeah, my art sometimes sort of gets short shrift, I'm afraid, because I'm focusing so much on a lot of other areas. But I have been trying to get back to it a little more and be more diligent about sketching and drawing and playing with watercolors. It's a little hard to say, yes, this is the art I do, because much of it is just sort of experimenting and sandboxing with things. But it's very satisfying to be able to get into an art project and just let the creativity flow.
Okay, so to end off, we have a lot of people listen to the show as authors and as readers. They want to do something special in life. They want to be creative. They want to do art. They want to write. They want to do music, something. But they have this nasty thing called a day job. And they have to try to balance the two. So with you, with all of the things you got going on and trying to balance these different worlds, do you have any things that are working for you to carve out time to write, to do your art, to do all these things and work at the same time? Any words of wisdom for somebody to encourage them that if you can balance it the right way, it could really work for you to be creative? Any words of encouragement for someone listening?
Yeah, I think the solution to balancing the day job with creative pursuits is sort of deceptively simple in that just do a little bit every day. And it can be really frustrating because you'll get enthusiastic about a project and you'll want to be the kind of person who's like, I sat down and I wrote the whole thing in a week and it just poured out of me. And I'm the kind of person where I work on it for about 40 minutes at a time. And sometimes that's all I manage in a day, but I try and do it every day. And that when I was before I started working in animation, I worked in a payroll company, and the people were lovely. The job was dull. But I would write while I was on the bus going to work, and I'd have my 40-minute window of I'm on the bus. I can't be doing other things. I'm just going to write. And that worked really well for forcing me into a routine of this is the time to write. I'm not deciding to do it. I'm just doing it at this time every day. Now I work from home, so I do have to decide to do it, but I do sort of give myself the window at the same time each day to do it. If that doesn't work for someone, I would just say find a time to do a little bit every day. Don't worry about how long it's going to take. It's going to take as long as it takes, but put in a little work each day and it'll add up and you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, because I come across so many people and they're just trying to balance those two. And sometimes our creative pursuits just get shelved because life gets in the way. Mm-hmm. But I just find that creativity just feeds everything in our lives and can help us at our job, whatever, in our relationships. Anytime we can uncover that creativity and leverage that, I think it just brings out another piece of us that we don't get to display. To Damien on stage, he gets to demonstrate a piece of him that he doesn't get to do anywhere else, mm-hmm. right? So that's what I love about your books and what you've written is you're giving us all a chance to jump up on stage, grab the mic, and see what happens. So
yep.
It's amazing.
Thank you. I think it's a great fun, and I hope people will check it out.
Awesome. Great. Everyone, all the information is always in the show notes. My request for you, when you buy all three, when you buy all three of these books, you're going to leave a detailed review for each of them separately so that everybody who comes across these books online and is making a buying decision, they're going to read your words about these amazing books and why you love them so much, you have the opportunity to share your words with the authors and the community by leaving great reviews. So I'm asking you, please, as you buy them, because I know you're going to buy them, and you're going to gift them to anybody who's a musician, hands in the air, make sure that you gift these and you give great reviews. Please, it's really helpful to our authors. Again, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you here. Keep me in mind with all the new historical fiction projects in the future.
Definitely, yeah.
I'd love to have you come back as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll hope to get to come back.
Excellent. Again, everybody, all information in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.